Movies That Changed My Life is brought to you by The Frame by Samsung. TV when it's on, art when it's off. Hey everyone, I'm Ian de Borja, and welcome to IMDb's Movies That Changed My Life, a podcast where your favorite stars break down the films that made them who they are today. This week's guest is actor William Jackson Harper. William joins me today to celebrate his 2020 Emmy nomination in the Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series category for his role as Chidi in the hit comedy The Good Place. William and I talk about the final episode of The Good Place, what parts of Chidi's wisdom he takes with him as The Good Place is over, and the two movies that changed his life. Once again, if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to give us a star rating and leave a review because every single one counts. Thanks again for listening. Now here's Movies That Changed My Life with William Jackson Harper. William Jackson Harper, honor for you to join us here on Movies That Changed My Life. How's your day going so far?
Good. You know, just another day in the house.
Well, you got some awesome news. Not too long ago, you have just been nominated for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series for your role of everyone's favorite philosophy nerd Chidi in The Good Place in this year's Emmys. So how does that feel? What was it like getting that nomination?
It was nuts. I was actually in the middle of doing a little at-home workout before our appointment with our dog psychic. Actually, the term is animal communicator, but it's just more fun for me to say dog psychic. And I, that was sort of the real pressing thing on my girlfriend's mind was just like, whoa, finally get to the bottom of what's going on with Chico. And then like Michael, my publicist, called me right in the middle of this workout, or not even in the middle. I think I was like just getting started, just slowly like willing myself to do a push-up. And he called and he was like, oh my God, you got nominated. And I was like, what? And then I told my girlfriend, she was like, what? And then I called my mom and she was like, what? And it was just, a whole lot of that for a solid half hour. And then we got on the phone with the psychic. And
spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the finale of The Good Place yet, the final episode is fantastic. In particular, your character of Chidi, like your last moments before, when you're speaking with Kristen Bell's character and when you finally take the leap through like the arch. What struck me and what struck, I'm sure, plenty of people watching is that Chidi from 4 seasons ago, it would have been a 4-episode arc of him deciding whether or not to walk through those arches. Yeah. And it's so beautiful when he goes, I'm ready. And then he just like walks through. He doesn't sit at the bench that's set there for him. When you read that in the writing or in the, script reading and stuff, did you get any heads up from Michael or any input that like you wanted Chidi to end sort of like with his decision, like finally being like, this is what I want?
This was one of those things, I think it's indicative of the journey that Chidi had been on. Second-guessing himself is just part of his DNA, and it's something that he actively decided to change, like in the last few episodes. And so that was one of the points that Mike wanted to make. This is the end of his journey because this is the thing, this is his biggest obstacle, is being decisive. And it was, I got to say, I think maybe just I wanted more time and I wanted to deliberate on it and to kind of go backwards a little bit. But I think it's like a really wise decision on behalf of Mike in particular in writing this last episode for it to be sort of an unprecious, goodbye once the decision is made. The hard thing is saying goodbye to Eleanor. That's the hard thing. Saying goodbye to my friends is the tough thing. But the decision is actually easy because it's just time.
For a podcast called Movies That Changed My Life, I think a lot of people treat The Good Place as a show that really like changed their lives for a very positive way. It kind of came in a very interesting time, I think, in American pop culture. It was this light of positivity and goodness, and sort of in a different way it tackles philosophy. Obviously, Chidi tackles that in a very strong way. Do you have thoughts on people who have been like so deeply affected by by your show and your character in particular?
Oh, I mean, I feel like there's something in our current political and social climate that necessitates a need to see optimism in some way. And the world feels really dangerous, and it seems like everyone's out for themselves, and no one really cares about anyone else. And I think it's really encouraging and comforting to see people who are investing deeply in each other and making decisions for each other. And I think also the fact that our show has a little bit of snark and bite while still being rooted very deeply in optimism is something that I think a lot of people gravitated to, and it's certainly something that I gravitated to, and something that I really enjoyed about the show. Because going to work was going to a place where these are the ideas that we're exploring, and this is the way we're going to explore them. And I've definitely needed that in the last few years. So to me, there's certain aspects of people really sort of latching on to the show that just makes perfect sense to me. Because things are just more frightening now.
So, last question here on Chidi. Do you have a favorite Chidiism or a favorite maybe philosophy or philosophical line that you had to learn that sort of stuck with you beyond the character?
Actually, something that Chidi said in the first season. I'm going to butcher this, but it's like principles are principles when you pick and choose when to use them or when to apply them. And that's something that I've actually run into a couple of times where, I've had to make some decisions in the last, couple of years that financially would have been great. And I thought I was a crazy person for deciding not to engage. And, here I am like a year and some change away from some of those decisions. And I feel good about that. I feel good that I decided to not do something that would cause me to sacrifice my moral stance on something. And I feel like that's really at the end of the day, that's what I've got. I've got my principles, and if I have to adhere to them even when it costs me something, and being able to apply that. And I think being on the show and being confronted with all of these ideas so often made it something that was very front of mind when faced with that decision. So that's stuck with me.
Well, congratulations again to you and all the other Good Place nominees. Outstanding supporting actor in a comedy series. Looking forward to it. I'm excited, rooting for you. I was a big fan of Chidi, big fan of the show. Hoping you guys come out on top that night.
Thanks.
So let's move on to the movies that changed William Jackson Harper's life. Two fantastic picks. Revisiting one, I have not seen the other, and we will get to that. But so the first one, which is 1992's Malcolm X. It is a 7.7 out of 10 with 83,000 ratings on IMDb. Directed by Spike Lee. Screenplay is written by Arnold Pearl and Spike Lee, based off the book by Alex Haley and Malcolm X. The film stars Denzel Washington as Malcolm X, Angela Bassett, Albert Hall, and Al Freeman Jr. Fantastic movie. It is best described as a 3.5-hour epic biopic, which it is. Movies were longer then in general, but even for then, it's still a very long movie. So when was the first time you saw this?
I saw it in middle school, actually.
Okay.
I was living in Texas, and I was actually going to this very very conservative, charismatic Christian school. And I remember my teachers having a big problem with Malcolm X, the man. And I was impressionable at that time, and I felt like, what they were saying was correct about him. And I remember the movie coming out and having very mixed feelings about, this guy that I had been told was a questionable character, and there were very few other black kids at my school. And this girl in the grade below me, Rachel, she had seen it, and she was not buying what we were being fed at school. And so she talked about the movie, and she talked to me about the movie. I don't remember the exact conversation, but I remember her saying something to the effect of, people want to paint him as this guy that just hated white people from the beginning of his life to the very end, and that's all that he was, and he wanted violence, and that's all that he stood for, and it's just not true. And so I went to the movie. My mom actually took me. I remember my mom. I remember coming home and saying some of these things to my mom, and my mom was like, "What they're telling you is not actually. That's not true. That is a way of looking at him that is very biased, and we should see this movie." And we went and we saw it, and it changed everything. It sort of just made me be a little bit more discerning about the information I'm taking in from people. And I remember actually reading the book after, and also revisiting the movie several times over the last, Lord, like 20 something years, and just thinking, this is my favorite bio. Like of any bio of anyone that I've seen, this really moves the story from the beginnings to the end without it feeling like we're just checking off eras, like rather than it just feeling there was a way that the movie moved, which felt like a real journey rather than just hitting the bullet points. And watching Denzel Washington perform in that movie, I mean, forget about it. Forget about it. That's one of the best performances committed to film, period.
Yeah, I was doing research that he went very deep into research into the film. Like, it got to the point where he knew what glasses to pick from like the prop area based on what day they were shooting, like in Malcolm X's real life.
Wow.
Like, if he knew he was speaking at this, he knew which set of glasses to pick up. It's okay, like he wore these on this day. Kind of crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you were seventh grade, right? Like, how long did it take for you to sort of process sort of like all the messages that not only Malcolm X was speaking about, but also Spike Lee was speaking of, like as a filmmaker telling his story, like, or did you capture it all in seventh grade? Did you have more conversations with your mom about it after, like, or was it sort of something that kind of molded over time, like you said, 20 something years?
I think it sort of molded over time. I just remember watching the movie and feeling like, how could anyone look at this man as dangerous or evil? And it was for me, it was like an awakening as a black kid. It was I felt empowered. It was really inspiring to see someone take power and to not ask, not be polite about it, but to take up the space. It was something that I really latched onto, and so that was my first reaction. And I think that sort of with the life that the way my life was at the time, and with the people that I was frequently associating with, I hadn't I guess I just came to resent the narrative that had been fed to me regarding
Right.
Malcolm X. And it sort of woke me up to be like, don't believe everything you hear from adults. Yeah. It's just like, don't just, they have their biases and they have their opinions and they're going to say them as if they're fact. And, just like come to your own conclusions. It was a moment where that sort of thing just, like woke up in me. And another thing, it's just going back to Denzel's performance. I feel like sometimes I watch people give a really good performance playing, an historical character, someone who really existed. But there's something about it which, there's a degree of mimicry there, which, has to be there. And I understand that. I just never felt that there was an ounce of mimicry anywhere. And so it just sets the bar so high for anything that comes out later, in any performance for me. It's like one of the things that I'm afraid of doing is actually playing an historical character at some point, because it's like what Denzel Washington did with that part is just so far above and beyond anything that I've seen. I didn't feel any it didn't feel like he was going to get the character. I was just watching Malcolm X.
Right.
You know, it was nuts.
So something about the film Malcolm X that really struck me also is that when Spike Lee was trying to make the film, WB wasn't giving him enough money to make it for the length he wanted to. They were going to give him like 2.5 hours and a couple of $1 million off of what he wanted. So in response, Spike Lee decided to forego all of his salary, and Denzel Washington decided to forego most of his salary. And then Spike Lee actually went to Oprah and Michael Jordan to help finance the film, because they also thought it was an important story to tell. And I think it's cool because, and then after WB saw the rough cut, they actually gave him more money for it. I mean, and I feel like part of that is they wanted, Oprah and Michael Jordan, and I'm sure the other people who helped finance it wanted to make sure that people like you, a young black kid getting a chance to have the story corrected, it seems to have paid off. No?
Yeah, no, well, thank you, Michael Jordan and Oprah. You changed my whole outlook on everything. Yeah, because it's a hugely important story. And, the other thing is that movie doesn't feel like it's that long.
No.
It doesn't feel like a long movie to me at all. How do you do that? How do you pull that off?
Yeah, it's an efficient 3.5 hour movie.
Yeah.
My last question here on Malcolm X is that, Spike Lee, he does a lot of things with, especially in his, very politically driven movies, which a lot of them are, but recently like Black Klansman and The Five Bloods and in Malcolm X, he uses footage from real life events to incorporate it into the film, to give the film context as to why he's making this film and telling the story. Obviously, at the end of Malcolm X, he uses real footage of Malcolm X over a really beautiful monologue about how can anyone think Malcolm X is a hateful person when you see his smile, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But he actually opens the film with real footage of Rodney King and the LA riots. So as a 7th grader, did you kind of comprehend that at the time? Were you sort of aware of the Rodney King riots and that going on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like to see it on screen and not in a not on a news story or anything like that?
Well, I think it was just for me, it was a moment that it felt like, I guess I thought that sort of thing was over. I thought that, a black man being beaten by the police and, the fact that I'm not sure if this happened by the time the movie came out, but all those officers getting acquitted and there being no I guess I thought at the time, well, we have videotape of them just beating this dude within an inch of his life. That's not going to fly, right? We're past that now. And I think that was something that I was like, oh, I guess we're not as far from those times as I thought. It's because it's like the footage, that I would see from, in school about the civil rights movement, at the time, those images were 20 something years old. And to me, right. When you're 10, 11, 12, 13, it's that's a long, long time ago. That's a long, long time ago. And now Rodney King is a long, long time ago. But it's oh, right. It's not like all the people that committed these hateful acts just all disappeared. They all had to go somewhere, and those points of view all went with them and infected other people. And so seeing that in that movie was one of those things that sadly it just sort of made me put my guard up a little bit more and be a little bit more aware of what's going on around me, what's being said, how people are reacting to me, in a way that I just hadn't really done,
Yeah. And then, obviously, unfortunately now it is, kids watching movies like Black Klansman or The Five Bloods today, they're saying, I thought that was really long ago.
Yeah. Not that long, guys. Not that long.
Yeah. It is an unfortunate cycle that we do tend to see. But, hopefully, new films from Spike or other people, Jordan Peele making these movies that are challenging sort of social constructs can have similar effects on people the way Malcolm X, the film, had on you.
My wife and I just moved into a new house, and we've been spending a ton of time decorating to make it really feel like our home. And sitting in the middle of our living room is our current TV that just sticks out like a sore thumb. So we've been wondering how we can make that black box match the rest of our house. Then we remembered the TV that is now on the top of our wish list for our living room. The Frame by Samsung. Now, the Frame is more than just a TV because it has this awesome feature called Art Mode, which turns the TV into art when it's off. With access to the art store with over 1,200 pieces of artwork from beloved classics to modern marvels to stunning photography, create your own personal art collection and enjoy in its beautiful, breathtaking QLED picture quality. Even better, we can upload some of our own photos to make me feel like the pictures I've taken of my dog are in a real-life art gallery. Now, we love this TV so much that we're planning on going the distance and even buying a customizable bezel that matches our living room decor perfectly to make the Frame really look like a frame. The Frame by Samsung. TV when it's on, art when it's off.
So I know you were working on this right before COVID started, but talk to us about the Barry Jenkins project for the Underground Railroad that's going to be coming to Amazon Prime later.
That was a great experience working with Barry Jenkins, who's like a personal hero of mine.
Mm-hmm.
It took a few days, took a few weeks to not be scared of him, just because he's a dude who's my age, who's a lot smarter than me, and whenever I
recent Academy Award Best Picture,
it's like when you're in the presence of a great artist, or at least when I'm in the presence of a great artist, I'm just like, oh Lord, this is the moment where they find out I'm not supposed to be here, and but it took a little while to kind of get over that. But then I got to say, like, he's just like he's a great collaborator, really, really smart, really beautiful story. I was a huge fan of the book, and
that won the Pulitzer Prize, I think, in 2017.
Yeah, and it's and I think it dialogues so well with a lot of things we're going through now, even things that we're going through a few years ago. A lot of the same questions that have been asked since the outset, since the founding of this country, are still being asked. And I think this story really, really dives deeper into those questions and gives you a parallel to sort of rethink the way we're looking at our lives now and our society now. And I think people say that about a lot of pieces of art, but for me, it's hyper personal.
One other thing is, so you are doing the Williamstown Theater Festival. It's called Animals, and it's by Stacey Osei-Kuffour, directed by Whitney White. And from what I understand, it's an all audible play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's about old friends and new couples and race. It's a really vicious, infuriating, entertaining play. And it's going to be all on in audio. It's going to be an audio play. So that's something different. The thing that's really great about being in a play is being in a room with your castmates and with an audience, and you're experiencing this thing in real time, and you're going through the entire thing from beginning to end, and it'll take on a life of its own once it's in front of an audience. And that is not what we're doing. This is driven by dialogue, and we're gonna have to do all of that work that we normally do with our bodies. We're gonna have to just put that into our voices, and it's gonna be interesting. It's a challenge. It's a fun challenge. I was actually just rehearsing for it today, and honestly, I got frustrated with myself, and because it's just a new medium, and it's and trying to navigate these things without being able to actually be in the space with your scene partners is difficult. But the play is really something, and I think it's going to be special.
Awesome. Well, people can look forward to that. They can search the Williamstown Theater Festival, and the play is called Animals by Stacey Osei-Kuffour. Let's make the jump to 2002 for the second movie that changed your life. This is City of God. It is an 8.6 out of 10 with 684,000 ratings on IMDb, directed by Fernando Morales and Katia Lund, written by Paolo Linz. He wrote actually the book that the film is based off of, and Braulio Mantovani wrote the screenplay, starring Alejandro Rodriguez, Leandro Firmino, and Seyu George. It's about in the slums of Rio, nicknamed the City of God, like the worst sort of favela, they call it, in Brazil. And it's sort of a group of kids from when they're young to when they're older, and sort of the stories and how they kind of go down different paths of the drug world, violence, someone wants to be a photographer, and that sort of stuff. I had never seen this movie. This was a big mark on my movie watching list. Like, sort of people say, you've never seen City of God sort of thing. So thank you for having me show it, because it's an easy 10 out of 10 for me, like no question.
Yeah.
So when was the first time you saw City of God?
I saw it in the theater. I actually wanted to see something else that night, and it was for some reason I think we were late or something. I can't remember, but for some reason I wound up actually going into City of God just on a whim, and I was not ready. I wasn't ready for that. It just blew my mind all the way apart. I think the thing that really stuck with me was there's so much comedy in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny, and there's so many moments of joy, and for that to be taking place, against this backdrop of living in a really violent neighborhood and seeing so many people having to do without and just do what they have to do. The movie didn't feel like it was all suffering for me, and it felt like a magic trick. I guess I expected the movie to feel a lot heavier, knowing, sort of knowing, I knew that it was about, the favelas, and that's about it. That's about all that I knew about it, and so it was. I don't understand. I just don't understand how you could have a movie that feels so unforced, yet so funny, yet so violent, yet so heartbreaking, all at the same time. I think it's definitely it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. Period. It's always, if anyone ever asks me what is one of your favorite movies, that's one of them. If it's not my absolute favorite movie.
Magic trick, that's an awesome way to put it. I think I'm going to steal that from you moving forward, because everything about it, everything makes sense for the film. It is such a polished screenplay. The cinematography is perfect. Every little thing. I mean, when I was watching it, I'll try not to spoil it too much, because in case other people haven't seen this like I haven't, but the way the beginning matches up with the end, and I didn't even think about that. When it was leading up to that, I'm like, what is going to happen? And then it recreates some things, and I was like, that was one of the best completion of a story moments I've seen in film. I was completely blown away when I saw that, and just the way in terms of the heartbreak stuff, they're introduced so many characters and you love them so quickly, and then some go away, literally in the blink of an eye, and they're moving on to the next thing. It's so crazy, right?
That's the thing. I think the thing is something about violence in movies that's weird, fast, and untidy, and that hits me a hell of a lot more than making it something heroic. When it's fast and weird and sloppy, and then immediately there's you see the pain that violence wrought immediately. It's so effective. I think the other thing I was struck by was I didn't realize this until recently, that so many of those actors were first-time actors.
Exactly what I was going to say. We were on the same wavelength.
Okay. I didn't know that for the longest time.
Yeah, in terms of again, another magic trick portion of it, and how it feels so real, is because it is very real. A majority of the actors were from either the real City of God or a surrounding favela around it. I mean, they tried filming right by there. From what I understand, it was too dangerous to actually film in the real City of God, so they were filming kind of around the outside. But everything was filmed, and all the actors were taking place there. Something that struck me is that Alejandro Rodriguez, who plays Rocket, he's essentially the main character for most of the film. There's a scene where he is speaking with someone, and he's in a nicer part of town, and he says, where do I take a shower? And then he actually says in the film, I've never had a hot shower before. That was not in the script. That is actually a conversation that the directors caught on film. He had never taken a hot shower before.
Whoa.
And yeah, I mean, That's crazy, right? Yeah.
That I didn't know that. That's wow.
I mean, that's heavy.
That's so
I mean,
heavy.
it's crazy that like they're able to take some of the darkest moments and situations like in their life and put it to film. Like, I mean, I'm no actor, so I could not see myself doing that. As an actor yourself, like, what do you think it would take to sort of take really like personal, like extremely personal things? Like, obviously, you don't have to say what these are, but there's a line, right, for people. Like, would you be able to cross sort of that line in terms of where you would want to take your performance and what stories you would want to tell to that level of like personal? Does that make sense? What I'm
Yeah,
saying there?
totally. It's like the things, like the deepest dives into my personal life would be pretty boring. Um, and they'd be boring at best and embarrassing at worst. And so I feel lucky in that regard.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
I don't know, but I'll tell you, there's a moment for me almost in every part that I play where there's an aspect of the character that I don't like that I realize is me, and that's
yeah.
why I don't like it. It's like
Okay.
it's a
Yeah.
flaw that I have that I don't want exposed. And I find myself sort of like struggling against it and struggling in those scenes. And so I don't know, to just sort of take your experience and put it out there, it takes a lot of gumption and a lot of will. And for me, it's always like a real struggle. So I can only imagine if the life that is depicted in City of God is close to your existence, how agonizing that could possibly be
Yeah.
for certain personalities.
Mhm.
Some people need to get it out. Some people need to exercise that, and then other people, they're like, I I'd rather not think about it. You know.
Right. Right. Are you a fan of not just Brazilian films, or are you a fan of foreign films, foreign language films in general? Is that sort of like an interest in your cinema watching?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Just because there's a there there's just an outlook that is different from the American outlook, and it's
Hmm.
it's always really interesting to see it and to you know to see like the sort of neural pathways that people forge in a society and how they are so different from, like, one mass of people on one piece of land thinks completely differently from another mass of people on another piece of land. And seeing the ways in which we differ in what's important and what's devastating, what brings joy, that's it's always just a really eye-opening experience for me. Also, performances are very different. Like
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't imagine any American actor approaching one of the parts in City of God and doing it in that specific way and having it feel truthful.
Yeah.
So I love watching foreign films just because I just love hearing and seeing how other groups of people what are the or rather not other groups of people think, but rather how there are commonalities within a culture that are
Hmm.
different from the commonalities in the culture that I'm used to.
Um, so, final question here. City of God, Malcolm X. Do you see a through line between those two films and why you think they changed your life?
Oh, well, that question takes time, but I can tell you that Malcolm X changed my life in a very there was a definite shift in my thinking after
Mhm.
watching that movie, and a shift that I'm grateful to have had at the time that I had it. And I feel like City of God shifted my thinking again. I think it's like with Malcolm X, it was more about the way I view the world and the way I view people around me and what's being told to me. And I think with City of God, it it cracked open my ideas about what the breadth of experience that's possible when telling a story. and because the movie for me is just so many things. It's as harrowing as it is. It's a movie that I rewatch because of the joy in it, and it's not about it's there's not that sort of evangelical missionary sort of like going in saving all the people. Look at how rough these lives are. That's not what it is. And I really appreciate the fact that it feels like people living their life in circumstances that I can't understand, and the fullness of that life is not just about the suffering. It's not just about the danger. And I feel like maybe up until that point I had a much narrower view of how stories dealing with that type of subject matter, how they need to be told. And now I don't hold that opinion at all,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This is awesome. Again, I will thank you again for having me see City of God. I can't believe
Yeah, man. It always makes me happy when I can introduce people to that movie. It's so good. Just amazing.
So, looking forward to the Emmys. You have your Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy for The Good Place and Chidi. A bunch of your other Good Place cohorts are there, including Outstanding Comedy Series, Outstanding Writing. Looking forward to the show. I hope you have a fun time doing all the sort of stuff leading into the show and that night, however it's going to take place. I'm sure it's going to be a new experience for you. So I'm looking forward to all that.
Oh, no, this is, it's, I'm actually okay with being at home, for that part of it. I get really nervous. So it's, it'll be really interesting. I'm so curious how this is all going to play out.
Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to head over to imdb.com/podcasts for more content on William and to easily add the movies that changed his life to your IMDb watch list.
Thanks so much for listening. Movies That Changed My Life is brought to you by The Frame by Samsung. TV when it's on, art when it's off.